Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great weekend so far. I'm meteorologist Bailey Braun and I'll be taking you through what we can expect for the remainder of our weekend. We're already through Saturday and we had a little bit of a glimpse of winter earlier this morning in Anchorage, but all across the state we're starting to feel those colder temperatures moving on through. So as we look ahead at our weather headlines, we are going to look at this picture from western Alaska. So we're already starting to see that snow accumulation moving on through for both western Alaska and into the interior. But in Anchorage today, we did have our first snowflakes falling, but they were super small. They were more like flurries than anything, but the bulk of what we're going to see for the weekend in terms of precipitation has already passed, and that's what we saw earlier this morning. So calm conditions are beginning to settle in statewide. This is in terms of winds as well as precipitation, cloud cover, stuff like that. But we are also moving in with our consecutive days with lows at or below 32 degrees, and that's starting to kick off this morning with our overnight lows staying pretty cold in the 20s. So looking at our snow chances, you can already see that our chances begin to dip down quite a bit by Sunday afternoon, but then they're going to pick up a little bit more moving into Monday. So we'll have a possibility of scattered snow chances moving into Monday with those colder temperatures as well as more moisture starting to move on through. So Sunday we're not going to see anything. It's going to stay very dry tomorrow with those mostly cloudy skies settling in for South Central. So just taking a peek right now across the state, we're seeing these mostly cloudy skies moving on through. You can see that in South Central, even in Ketchikan, even though it's pretty dark, it's a little hard to see. But you can see in Fairbanks that snow starting to accumulate as those temperatures start to sit in the 20s for those highs. So it is getting pretty cold out there. And even just looking right now at the Richardson Highway, you can see that snow accumulation. It's still pretty fresh and those temperatures are still sitting in the mid-20s. So that's what highs are expecting to look like pretty much across the next week or so, especially for the interior across the region. We're seeing those highs still sitting in the 20s at sub-freezing temperatures. So it's getting pretty chilly. It's that time of year. Winter is starting to settle in just a little bit more, but even just looking at our satellite and radar, these are the more calm conditions that I was talking about. I mean, there's nothing going on really across the state. We see some cloudy skies moving in from western Alaska into the interior, even moving through South Central. But over in Southeast, also pretty calm conditions with some scattered showers moving on through today. But then you can see our isobars tracking those wind speeds, still staying a little bit gusty over in the Aleutians, and that'll pick up into tomorrow. But otherwise, very calm conditions moving on through, very little happening. So looking ahead right now, see that low pressure sitting out in southeast that starts to dwindle away as it pushes into southeast, but that's starting to bring some scattered showers. But tomorrow, if you're in southeast, you're really not going to see much rain whatsoever. And if you do see any rain, you're only going to see about 1 to 2 hundredths of an inch. So hardly any rain expected for southeast, just mostly cloudy skies moving on through, significantly drier than what you've been seeing lately. But over in western Alaska, you can see that chance of snow starting to stretch into Bethel, even into Nome, as that low pressure system kind of, teeters back and forth into the Bering Sea along that coastline. So western Alaska moving into the interior, staying pretty dry. You can see those mostly dry conditions, very clear conditions as well. Even into the interior, that's another thing we can expect moving overnight into Monday. So pretty dry, pretty calm, very benign weather otherwise, but even just tracking our snow totals moving in from Sunday into Monday, we're going to see about a trace of some snow. So that's really not much. That's, if anything, you'll see it fall from the sky. It won't really stick whatsoever, but even into the North Slope, we're seeing 1 to 2 inches, but over in Gamble, 2 to 4 inches is something that you can expect to see. So that's kind of the area that's going to see the most snow out of the rest of Alaska, but even then, not a whole lot, especially for this weekend. Now just looking at our rainfall totals, you're going to notice that it is very, very dry. You're already seeing that gap of green all the way from essentially Kodiak spanning all the way up into Galena. Very dry conditions, not much rain expected. Even in South Central, not really expecting a whole lot, just a little less than 1/4 of an inch for Seward. That's really the only spot expected to get any rain for Alaska, but over in southeast you can already see drying up significantly. You will see a little bit more rain moving on through from St. Paul down into the Aleutian chain, and that's from that low pressure system that's sitting in the Bering Sea. But other than that, nothing crazy. It's really just very calm conditions moving on through. It's that time of year. Just a little bit of a break before some more storms start to roll in, but those temperatures you can already see going into tomorrow morning, sitting below freezing in Anchorage, everywhere across the state other than the Aleutian Chain and Southeast, which typically stay warmer than the other areas, but elsewhere across the state, spanning from South Central all the way up into the North Slope, we're seeing those temperatures staying very chilly, so into the low 30s for South Central, spanning into the 20s and even the teens across the interior, and then all the way up at 9 degrees in Anchorage Pass. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, just a little heads up, if you're in Anchorage Pass, next week you might see those sub-zero temperatures, so we're going to start to look at that with both those highs and those lows getting pretty cold. So winter is coming, it's making itself known, but even just into Sunday afternoon, you're going to see those temperatures just barely above freezing for Anchorage. So our highs are expected in the mid-30s. You can already see that cooling trend moving on through into Monday, with those highs staying very similar as Sundays in the mid-30s for South Central, but even into the interior, those highs staying in the 20s. So Southeast Alaska, here you go, 40 degrees, roughly what your high temperatures are going to be, but those lows aren't really quite reaching freezing just yet, but you're already noticing those sky conditions much drier than what you've been seeing. So we've got these very light scattered showers moving on through. If anything, those mostly cloudy skies are rolling on through, and that's what you can expect moving in for Sunday. Into the interior, there's those highs that I had mentioned, those very cold temperatures in the 20s, and those lows dipping down even into the teens. But areas like Tok, even Healy and Fort Yukon, expecting some light snow moving on through. Now, if you do get that, that's going to be overnight into the early morning hours. Not too much expected during the daytime for tomorrow. Otherwise, staying mostly dry with those mostly cloudy conditions. Now for the North Slope, we're seeing those temperatures in the low 20s, very similar to the interior, but just low 20s, dipping down into single digits for that low in Anchorage Pass. But mixture of frozen rain and snow is something you can expect for Sunday. Just a little bit of that moisture rolling on through, but western Alaska still staying pretty dry, even into those western interior areas, seeing partly sunny skies as well, but those highs are staying near freezing. Gamble not quite making it at 35 degrees, but there is about 2 to 4 inches of snow expected for today moving into Sunday. So spanning across for the whole weekend, about 2 to 4 inches of snow accumulation, but even Bethel will see a little bit of that mixture, and you already saw that from that low pressure system that was bringing in a few little short bands of moisture, but those low temperatures are sitting in the 20s and even dipping down into the teens as well across some of the western coastline. Now for the Aleutians, seeing those temperatures still staying a little bit warm in the 40s, with those low temperatures sitting near freezing for St. Paul, Dillingham, but not quite in the other stretches of the Aleutian Chain. You're going to see those mostly cloudy skies with some rain moving on through. You're going to notice those gusting winds between 30 to 40 gusts miles per hour. So that's something that you can expect, just a few of those windy gusts moving on through as that low pressure system kind of hangs out in the Bering Sea. You already saw it kind of wasn't moving very much. It was just kind of going back and forth a little bit. So that's kind of why it's just staying in the same place, bringing some of those windier gusts into the Aleutians as well as some moisture. Now for South Central, we're seeing those temperatures starting to dip down just a little bit. Doesn't look very noticeable, but our temperatures were sitting very similar to what Seward is seeing in the low 40s, but across the region we're already seeing it start to drop down into either 40 or into the 30s. You can see that in the more northern portion of the Kenai Peninsula, but even in the Copper River Basin we're also seeing those temperatures cooling down just slightly. Whittier is pretty much the only windy spot that we're expected to see over the weekend moving into Sunday, but those mostly cloudy skies are going to take over across the region. You're going to notice that moving into the valley as well, with those highs sitting in the 30s, those lows dipping into the 20s, mostly cloudy skies, and that's exactly what Anchorage is seeing as well, those mostly cloudy skies with the highs in the 30s and lows sitting in the 20s. So it is getting pretty chilly. You can already see that with our temperatures in the 30s and then that streak of low temperatures sitting in the 20s pretty much for the next week. So that's what you can expect to see. And then on Monday was when we were expected to see our chance of snowy mixture. So that's just something to think about if you're planning anything for Monday. Fairbanks, though, we're seeing those temperatures sitting in the 20s. So Might see some morning fog likely for tomorrow morning. It's going to be pretty chilly, so freezing fog is likely for the morning hours, but then mostly cloudy skies pushing on through, and then those low temperatures just gradually starting to dip down into the low teens at 13 for the low Tuesday night moving into Wednesday. So it's that time of year. It's getting chilly. We're approaching the winter season, so make sure that you are doing what you need to do, getting your snow tires. I haven't done that yet, but what can I say? I'm working on it. So make sure you get ahead on those things, but also just expect those temperatures to start dipping down by tomorrow and then moving forward through the next work week. So next week is really going to be when we're getting a taste for those colder winter temperatures, as well as some of those more wintry mixtures in terms of precipitation. The interior is already seeing that. Obviously the North Slope's already been seeing that as well, but southeast and the Aleutians still seeing some rain chances, but those lows are going to start to dip down towards freezing within the next week or two. So that's just what you can expect for the remainder of your weekend. I will see you back here again tomorrow with our work week forecast. So I hope everybody has a great night and enjoy the rest of your weekend as well.